Hey everybody, welcome back to the Christian Channel Podcast. I'm your host, Austin Kelly, and today I'm really excited about our guest, Robert from Purely Catholic, a Catholic content creator who's making a real impact online. If you haven't seen his YouTube channel yet, Purely Catholic is producing powerful videos about the faith, from apologetics to Catholic commentary and evangelization, reaching the hearts and minds all over the world. Today, we're talking about how Robert started his mission, the challenges and blessings of the Catholic voice online, and how his work is helping bring more people closer to Christ. Robert, welcome to the Christian Channel Podcast. It's great to have you on.
Hey, thanks for having me. Great to be here.
So let's start from the beginning of your journey. How did Purely Catholic come to be, and what about it inspired you to start sharing the Catholic faith on YouTube?
Well, yeah, I guess starting at the beginning, I grew up Lutheran. I'm actually a convert, so we didn't go to church a whole lot growing up, but that's kind of the environment I was raised in. And then when I met my wife, we got married in 2019, and I kind of started going to church with her. So it's interesting. She's Ukrainian Catholic, so that was kind of my first Catholic experience. And she would go to the cathedral in downtown Chicago. And it's very different than Roman Catholicism. The aesthetics are different, the liturgy is different, kind of the whole experience. The masses are longer, a lot more traditional in many ways. And so that was kind of the feel I first got. And I went to some Roman Catholic masses later on down the line. But before we got married, I actually converted into the Ukrainian Catholic Church. And from there, I kind of slowly grew into it. I was a believer. I was into the faith for the most part, but I guess that spark hadn't really been lit quite yet. And as time went on, I read the Bible cover to cover. That was kind of a huge turning point for me. And I kind of started to learn more and more about the faith. And I thought, hey, maybe I can, do some research, put some stuff up on YouTube and see if anything strikes a chord, and I can kind of learn while I'm making videos. Because, when I first started, I didn't know almost anything. And then, there's an endless amount of information to obtain within the Catholic faith. So one of my first videos I did, just like a basic, hey, here's who the top 5 contenders to be for the next Pope might be. This was maybe a year and a half ago. Pope Francis was getting older. It was kind of a hot topic. People were interested in the papacy at the time, and it kind of went viral. It got over 1 million views, and I had maybe 500 subscribers at the time. So I realized, wow, there's a huge demand for this content. I just kept learning more and more about the saints, and my style of channel has changed a lot too. I never showed my face at first. I just, had kind of like I used like an AI voice. I did top 10 lists, and, those did really, really well. And I kind of wanted to branch off and do something different though. And eventually I started showing my face and, talking more about current events and things facing the church today. I have much more of an interest in that topic. And, and here we are today, and, there's always something to talk about. There's always something to do a video on. There's a lot of Catholic YouTubers out there, but, I'm still trying to kind of find my niche.
Well, I think you found it, right? Because some of your topics are very newsworthy. Like you were just talking about recently, the Anglican bishop, right? That promoted stuff that contradict our Christian faith, that contradicts our Catholic faith. And you were just really honest about it. And I think, that honest tone really brings and invites people to discover the truth. And I'm a Catholic. I think, the one true faith is the Catholic faith. So it's a good thing that you're producing those videos. So what's your main goal when someone's watching your content, and what do you hope they take away from Purely Catholic?
Well, I guess it's really twofold, right? I'm talking to people who might not be Catholic, and then I'm talking to people who are already Catholic. So, the people that are already Catholic, they know the basics. They know, you don't have to explain anything. You don't have to lay any groundwork really. They want to, you can reference things without having to, give a definition, right? And so, I'm partially speaking to them and just kind of, giving them updates, trying to keep them involved in the church. And I really want to, some people accuse me of being negative on my channel, which, there's a lot of negativity out there. There's a lot to talk about. There's a lot of current events, and the outrage is generally what people are talking about, right? You want to be relevant in many ways. So, but I want to draw attention to things that I see as injustices in the church, and that's kind of my focus on the people that are already Catholic. Making sure that they're aware of maybe cardinals who aren't acting appropriately, or maybe who are trying to push a certain viewpoint that is, contradictory with Catholic doctrine. And I want to make sure they're aware of kind of the internal struggles we have in the church. A lot of Catholics, will say that the biggest threat to the church is internal. There's external forces working on the Catholic Church, but there's a lot of people from the inside that are trying to undermine the faith and are trying to pull people away from Christ, in the name of Catholicism. So I try to bring attention to those stories for people who are already in the church, and I try to give content to people who might not be in the church yet. There's a lot of different ways to evangelize. Like there's the classic trope, hey, have you accepted Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior? I don't know how effective maybe that's still effective, but I think a lot of people are attracted to Catholicism through kind of some of the interesting stories. So, I try to do, the other day I did a video on Tom Vanderwody, who's kind of just a dad from Virginia, and he has an amazing story, and he passed away suddenly, and now they're looking to open up a cause of canonization for him out in the Diocese of Arlington. And kind of just everyday stories like that might appeal to someone that doesn't know that much about the Catholic faith. Like, hey, here's how you, just a regular person, can, have such a huge impact on the church, and, maybe even be considered to be a Catholic saint one day. It could really happen to anyone. So I try to draw attention to those stories too, for people who might not be into the faith yet, or might just be on their journey into kind of exploring what's going on.
Yeah, wow. It's very powerful because like I often look at Catholic content creators, and this is not the first time I've said it. It's right now we're kind of like in this new era of publication and media where you just said a second ago, you hit over 1 million views. So 1 million people all around the world saw that video you created. It kind of makes you think like, and it's so important too, like how how do I, imitate Christ? Because so many people listen to me, right? It's very tempting to kind of go out there and say, I'm going to slander this Catholic content creator. And what does that do, Robert? It just divides the church. And that's kind of like what I love about your channel. It's like you see that there's a lot of newsworthy topics, but you're kind of like pointing people to the saints and pointing people to the cross and saying, look what Jesus did for us. Look what this saint, what virtues this saint had to imitate Christ daily. So it's a big responsibility, which leads me to my next question. Evangelizing online can both be rewarding and difficult. What have been some of the biggest challenges you faced as a Catholic content creator, and how have you stayed strong in the faith through those moments?
Well, that's a good question. I think going back to the negativity, when Pope Leo first became Pope, he claimed he wanted to unify the church. And I think that is something that can bring you down as a Catholic content creator sometimes, is how divided we are, right?
Oh, yeah.
You just look at any comment section on any video that might be talking about a current event, right? And I actually made a video today that I posted about, the Pope was asked yesterday if he wanted to comment on Donald Trump sending the National Guard to Chicago. And he said, no comment. I have no interest in talking about, current events in the United States. And I kind of had this wonderful moment reading through Twitter because everyone agreed. Everyone was happy. I didn't see a single negative comment. Everyone said, that is a great response from the Pope. We're happy to hear it. No complaints from anybody. And it was kind of the first time in a long time that I've seen that. Because, there was all this, commotion over the blessing of the ice. There was all this commotion over the, Dick Durbin Blaise Supich award in the Archdiocese of Chicago, and it's just kind of like one event after the other that's negative. And we all report on these things, and we all use this as content, but it was very refreshing to see everyone united for once. We were all kind of behind one common good. Because I posted another video today about what to do to help Christians in Nigeria who are being persecuted.
Oh yeah.
And just the opposing viewpoints in the comments are amazing. Some people are saying, we need to go in there with troops, and some people say, no, we could never do that. We just have to use prayer. Everyone's got a different idea, right? And that's healthy in many ways because we're all still trying to figure this out all together. But I will say the divisiveness, especially on social media, can make me second guess whether I want to make a video or not a lot of the time.
Yeah, that's a tough call too, because we actually have a video with Father Dom Calloway talking about Boko Haram and how to fight, this radical terrorist group trying to kill, innocent Christians just living their faith. I have a personal story. When I was 16, I actually attended Stanford University, and I was kind of a basically a idiot of a kid, right? I don't know how did I get in this school, but then the other one part was like one of our closest, I guess, teacher's aide was Nigerian, and he was such a his name was I guess it should be nameless, but he was just such a devout Catholic, and he says, okay, we go to mass. All the kids, all the Catholic kids, come with me. We go to mass. And we went to mass and it was very beautiful. But one thing I remember that took away was from this Nigerian Catholic was how devoted he was to the Catholic faith. So I think just piggybacking on Donald Calloway's very quick video, the rosary's the weapon. You know, Jesus Christ appeared to one of the bishops and said, Boko Haram is gone, and he turned this, and the rosary turned into a sword. So, listen, I'm just giving my commentary. I'm like you too. I'm just fascinated about these apparitions. I'm just fascinating about these stories of the faith, and which leads me to my next questions. You know, how do you see? Because you do commentary, and I love it, and you're doing everything great. How do you see purely Catholic fitting into the bigger picture of Catholic apologetics and evangelization in the near future?
Well, it's a good question because everybody kind of has their niche on YouTube, right? You have your straight up apologists, your Trent Horns, your Jimmy Akins, these guys that are just fierce defenders of Catholic dogma and Catholic doctrine. And then you got people that report on the news or current events. I'm kind of in that mix, and you got some people like that might report on Catholic dating. Everyone has kind of something that they'd like to talk about, right? So. And I think I'm still trying to kind of, trying to find my niche, still trying to find out exactly, what message I'm trying to get across. But, for now, I think it's, just kind of just trying to, browse Twitter, browse the news, see what people are saying and just kind of get a feel. My last few videos have been, I've kind of done like Twitter reacts to X event because I want to try to bring in as many different viewpoints as possible because, you have your traditionalists, you have your modernists, you got everyone in between, but one thing I try to remind people as much as possible is, so I went to a family party this past weekend,
Okay.
almost all Catholic, and I was asking around about some of the Catholic current events, and I'll tell you, no one had any idea what I was talking about. The blessing of the ice, nobody had any idea. They kind of knew that there's something going on with Durbin and Cardinal Cupich. There's an award. They had no idea that the Pope made a comment about it. They had no idea that the award or that Durbin had said he wasn't going to take the award. And, that was kind of an enlightening moment to me, as someone who makes content like this, because it all seems like the end of the world, right? Every time one of these big events happens, what direction is the church going in? How can we keep doing this? Over and over, people are going to leave. But then most Catholics, most people that are going to church have no idea about any of this stuff, about any of this minutia. They go to church, they pray the rosary, and they read the Bible and maybe look at stories here and there, look at a YouTube, like a top 10 list every now and then on YouTube, but that's not a huge part of their lives, all this daily news, right? So I've been just trying to remind everyone to check out every now and then, turn off Twitter, turn off YouTube, turn off TikTok, and just be a Catholic in the daily world. Because if you're not looking at Twitter, none of this stuff is actually happening. Your daily life will remain exactly the same. And the same goes for politics. We're obsessed with looking at what's going on in the White House and across the country. But if you just turn it off and go outside and talk to your neighbors, it's like none of this is actually happening, right? And I think that's kind of the message I'm trying to get across. The gates of hell will not prevail. And just have everyone relax a little bit and, embrace their Catholic faith as much as possible in the day-to-day. And I'd say that's mostly my main goal at this point in time.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I have to make a joke because when I saw your video about the Pope blessing the ice, I just thought, maybe he's trolling us. Maybe he's just saying this is just the tip of the iceberg. You catch what I mean.
Yeah, we got 19 years left to go. Yeah, exactly.
So I want to pull it back because I'm a little curious. I'm a Catholic. I've been a Catholic my whole life, but I reverted back to the faith, and I'm sure our audience is very curious. What's the difference between like a Ukrainian Catholic church and like your Novus Ordo Catholic church and your Latin Mass Catholic? Because this is the first time I'm hearing about it.
Yeah, I'd say it's almost a hybrid between Novus Ordo and Latin Mass, probably a little bit more towards the Latin Mass side. And there's a lot of differences, for instance. So my kids, when they're baptized, they also take First Communion at the same time. So you take communion from when you're an infant. So
Wow.
every day when we go to church, my 2-year-old is up there taking communion, and normally in a Roman Catholic church you would probably do that around third or fourth grade.
Right.
The liturgy is as ad orientem, so the priest is facing away from us almost entirely. Um, he's facing liturgical east for the mass. That's something that you would see in a Latin mass as well. Um, it's also another big difference is that our priest is married with children.
Hmm.
So his son is an altar boy. So he's up there, kind of, going through the motions with his dad, and that's something that, of course, you would never see in a Roman Catholic church. And it's kind of a hybrid of Ukrainian and English, So I understand, a chunk of it for that matter, but and the liturgy is mostly sung, so
Oh,
that's something
wow.
that you'd also see more on the Latin Mass style of things, and there's some audience participation, going on with the Novus Ordo, they're singing from the audience and whatnot, but no one's going up to read scripture, no kids from the pews are going to read scripture or anything like that. And then we take communion through intinction. So they dip a spoon with bread in wine and then kind of just drop it in your mouth. So you get the body and the blood every time, and it never touches your hand, it never touches the priest's hands or anything. So those would be kind of some of the main differences you would see if you were to go to a Ukrainian Catholic Church. I know that Matt Fradd with Pints of Aquinas, I'm pretty sure he converted to Ukrainian Catholicism in the last couple of years. I think you're seeing that more and more because people are looking for a very reverent liturgy, and Latin Mass communities are being shut down left and right. So and the Pope has said explicitly he loves the Eastern liturgies. He's like, this is a tradition that we need to maintain, and we should honor these traditions. So there's really no threat that the Vatican is going to try to change the Eastern liturgy. So I think a lot of people are finding refuge and solace in that. So I've been really happy to be there. It's kind of my first experience in the Catholic Church, but we still go to the Novus Ordo at my son's school, and still got lots of love for that as well.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Yeah. So thanks for educating us. And for any Catholics listening, so the Ukrainian Catholic Church is a part of the Catholic Church, right? Is right.
Yeah, it's in full communion with Rome. It's I think there's 21 Eastern rites. It was the biggest, and I actually think the Syro-Malabar Church in India has officially passed it up. So I believe they're number one now. Ukrainian Catholic is number two.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. We're going to close in a second, but one thing we're here in Los Angeles right now, and there's a lot of talk in the Novus Ordo Church, like how do we unify, how do we rebuild our church, and I just think there's such a contrasting difference because the Novus Ordo Catholics here in Los Angeles, they're kind of like they're getting older, but if you go to the Latin masses, we have a universal church. And like one thing I've noticed in just being observant is like when you go to Novus Ordo, it's like the English people are in the, in the morning or in the evening, right? When you go to the Latin mass here in not such a great part of town in Los Angeles, you have Russians, you have Mexicans with tattoos, African Americans, you have such a universal, diverse walk of life, and they're all speaking different languages, by the way. I think I don't have a solution for everything, but I think it would be great if there was just one universal church. Because like if you and I travel to Ukraine or if you and I travel to Japan, it would make sense to go to a Latin mass. I don't know. What your commentary on that?
I mean, you're exactly right. I've made that exact same point on multiple occasions on my channel. Yeah, I mean, you have churches in the major cities that have 3, 4, 5 masses in different languages all throughout the day. Spanish is obviously huge throughout the country. And yeah, you're right. You can't go anywhere in the world and hear the Latin Mass. And we claim to be the universal church. That would just be so poetic and perfect if we just had a universal liturgy that everyone could understand. Now, if we could get to the point where the Latin Mass was kind of back in action and that's what everyone was getting around the world, that'd be great. Right now, I know the Latin Mass communities are just trying to get into a chapel, here and there throughout the country to sneak around and find a place to worship. So, where this is all going, I have no idea. The Pope has made some remarks on the Latin Mass. He says he hasn't really thought about it that much, which was kind of surprising to me because he's met with Cardinal Raymond Leo Burke twice already. and he's kind of the standard bearer when it comes to the Latin Mass. And I'm thinking, man, if you had 2 sit-down conversations with Raymond Leo Berg, you must know everything about the Latin Mass, about why we need it, about why it's so reverent, why it's bringing young people into the church. But he said maybe we need to use synodality to figure this issue out. And I'm not a huge lover of the synodal approach, but I think the bishops agree that we need to bring the Latin Mass back. So if we have to get all the bishops together and we have to get them all in one room to convince the Pope that let's at least let people worship how they want as a starting point, then I say give it a shot. What do we have to lose at this point, right?
What do you got to lose? Come on, everybody.
It couldn't get any worse.
For listeners who want to follow your work, where can people find you, support you, and stay connected for Purely Catholic?
Well, yeah, of course, you can find me at Purely Catholic on YouTube. That's probably where most people follow me. I'm also on TikTok, also at Purely Catholic. I post basically the same videos I post for my shorts on YouTube, plus a little additional content on there. So either those locations, or contact me at purelycatholic90@gmail.com if you want to get in touch with me.
Awesome. Robert, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an honor having you on the show. What you're doing with Purely Catholic is such a blessing for the church and a great example of how media can be used for evangelization. To everyone listening, make sure to subscribe to Purely Catholic on YouTube at youtube.com/purely_Catholic. Share his videos, support the mission, and help spread the faith. You can also check out more Catholic shows, podcasts, and films on thechristianchannel.com. I'm Austin Kelly, the host for today on the Christian Channel podcast, and thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next one. God bless everybody.
Thanks.